And we now say hello to our pal Dave Thomas here on ESPN Radio 94.1. How's March 2021 treating you compared to March 2020, Dave?
It's dramatically different, that's for sure. A year ago, things were shutting down, and we're starting to get a bit of an uptick here now, and we're waiting to get into football facilities. So anytime we can play football or basketball, even during a pandemic, it's a good day.
Well, as we touch on the Dukes, both on the gridiron and the hardwood here, tell us real quickly, we'll begin with football too, but how's it been for you in terms of calling the games this year? And I know you've been like me, having to go in places with face shields on, correct?
Yeah, I do a game in a face shield. I wear glasses, and masks and glasses usually don't blend very well, so it's better to see. So we've been pretty fortunate. I've been able to go to every game and broadcast, and thankful that the schools were willing to work with us to allow me to have somewhere to at least see the game from some angle. So maybe not the best positioning sometimes, but, as long as you can see the game and be inside the facility, it's much better than what a lot of our counterparts are having to do working from home, and they've got the luxury of doing that. But I think everybody would still rather be on site.
Sure. And, going back to around August, September, we were wondering how the college football season would play out. Pretty much all but a few schools for FBS, including one here close to our hearts in the hometown, Old Dominion, could not go. And ODU was hoping to go in the spring. That quickly got thrown away, as it did for a couple other FCS programs out there when you look at like Norfolk State and Hampton here in our own backyard. But did you have some apprehension about whether this spring football season, if you will, would get off the ground for the Dukes and other FCS programs in the country?
Yeah, I really did. I mean, I'd be lying if I said I didn't. What's it going to – and we knew college basketball was going to either make or break if we're able to have games and broadcast games and listen to sacrifices that the universities are making, the folks who work around them and their ancillary programs, and student athletes themselves. They've got to be willing to take sacrifices. And listen, a lot of them have done the right thing and still had to hit pause. So, I was very, very skeptical at first. Honestly, when we first started talking about spring, there's no way. If we don't play in the fall, we're not playing the next year. And then it's more we begin to see about it, and talking to Coach Curt Cignetti, he goes, it can be done. And what we have to do is shift our focus. And he said, that's what we're doing. And you have to credit the programs that have been able to do that. Those who couldn't, I don't fault them either, because it is an immense sacrifice. It's an immense expense for teams and athletic departments to take on with the testing and the protocols and, the extra buses that it takes to move a team, especially a football team, from one place to the next. It's usually 4 buses. Now I think it's like 7. So, it's been a big expense and a sacrifice. But also these colleges make a commitment to these student athletes. And they say, you come here, we're going to give you the best experience and the best opportunity to play and compete for championships. And schools like JMU and others that have pushed their way through and forged through are honoring that commitment to their student athletes.
What have you seen so far through 2 games for the Dukes, both offensively and defensively? What stood out to you?
Well, I think, we had a lot of question marks coming in, to be honest with you. We didn't know what defense was going to look like. You lose so many players. We were familiar with a lot of these kids, and we saw some of them play last year and take some strides, but there were still some guys we'd only seen really participate in practice, and they're starting to come along. I guess the best way to sum it up, really, Matt, is when we got off the plane from Frisco, Texas, back at the Shenandoah Valley Airport, I'm sitting out front of the airport waiting on our bags to come around. And Coach Cignetti comes up, and he's got a notebook in his hand, and he's got a smile on his face. I said, Coach, you seem to be in pretty good spirits. And he goes, Dave, I spent the last 2 hours going through, watching the game again, and I've got 4 pages of notes that I've started why we can be back here next year. And then he told me a few weeks ago, I reminded him of that conversation. He goes, those 4 pages turned into an entire notebook. And he likes his staff. He likes his kids. They're recruiting the right kind of kids. The incoming class seems to be really special, although they're not showing it now per se where fans can see it. But the limited practice time I get, some of these young men are really coming along. So I like what we see. They had a bad first half last week. Might be the best thing for them to have it then instead of later in the year. But the coaching staff quickly reminded them, this is not how we play. This is not what we do. We're not here to be pushed around. And I think the message was conveyed at halftime, and the second half bore that out.
Talking with Dave Thomas, the radio voice for the Dukes of JMU, our guest here on 757 Saturday Sports Talk on ESPN Radio 94.1 as JMU gets set for a football matchup at Elon today, 1:30 kickoff. Also the basketball team in action, the regular season champs, are the top seed for the CAA tournament, and they'll be in action on Sunday. And you can follow Dave on Twitter, DT Radio Guy. And Dave, one right here from the 757 area code, Diamonte Tucker-Dorsey. A couple of big games here for him early on with Morehead State and Robert Morris. He's got 12 tackles, one for loss, also been pressuring the quarterback, much like we saw with Dimitri Holloway, who was bigger at 6'2" at a Heritage High in Newport News. The 5'10" Tucker-Dorsey, really a backbone of this defense now, and if he was 6'2" like Holloway, he might have gone up to one of those Power 5 schools, I think.
Oh, there's no doubt about that. He's always been a kid who stood out to me just because of his athleticism. And he caught my attention early last year in the season, and I saw him working, with the coaching staff. And he was asking questions, and they were bringing him along. And you could tell his intellect was really sinking in. College football was really sinking in for him. And they like him. They think that maybe he might be the prototypical linebacker. Again, maybe a little undersized, but the best overall linebacker that the Dukes have got, top to bottom, if you're checking off multiple categories. He's a kid that's really smart. He and his running mate, Kelvin Asanama, they've been together for a while. And those two guys communicate well. They communicate with the rest of the defense well. And that is so important when you're filling a lot of voids like JMU did from last year. But, two, when you want to play physical, you want to play aggressive, that communication is that much more important. You don't have to think. You see a lot of guys just playing and not thinking because they're reacting to what they see and because they're so well studied.
And another local kid, though he didn't have the best of first halves, we should say, against Robert Morris with the interceptions, Cole Johnson out of Cox High School in Virginia Beach. As you look at him in the QB spots, what's kind of catching your eye there?
Well, Cole's a very smart kid, and he made some mistakes last week. You can still be very smart and not be perfect, and that's what happened. And Coach Cignetti reminded us in our post-game conversation last week that Cole still hasn't played a ton of football. He sat behind Brian Shore, then he was behind Ben DiNucci, and he's had some experience, and he learned from it. And I thought the 2-minute drive they put together right before halftime, that really set the tone. He came out and was quick, efficient. Again, really didn't have to stop and think. He knew what he needed to do, and he got it done. Second half, he did the same thing. Again, he's a kid who came here for more than just football. He came for the business school. So, again, back to Cole's intelligence, what he can do on the football field and with the football in his hands. He's had some great guys to play behind. He's learned a lot from them, but he's also got a good coaching staff that's helping him along. I'd be surprised if Cole didn't come out and have a very good day today because I know he's a very much competitive fellow, and he wants to play well. He wants to lead this football team. It's his time to do that. And I think he's going to try to come out and push that along and make people forget about the first half of last week.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, Dave. Didn't he fill in for Shore and had about 274 yards, a couple touchdowns when he filled in that game back in, 2016 against Elon?
Yeah, he took over the second half against a really good Villanova team. And when Cole came on the field, we could see from the press box, his eyes were the size of hubcaps. I mean, he was really taken aback by how quickly things turned. And they got him a game plan at halftime, and the defense really helped him out. Then it was an Elon team that wasn't very good then, and they were still under their former coaching staff. And honestly, they just didn't have the players. And Cole came out as a freshman and just picked them apart. And again, they put a game plan together that fit him in the limited time he had to play. But he's got that experience to draw on. He watches a lot of film. He's a smart guy. He's been around this program a long time. So he can do a lot of things with the football in his hands. They're not afraid of Cole Johnson hurting them today. They've got the utmost belief in him. Now, they also believe in Gage Maloney, who's his backup. And Coach Cignetti admitted, we thought about making the change, but 2 minutes before the end of the first half, we felt we needed to give Cole the opportunity because he was in he was warm. He was ready to go. And to bring in Gage at that point might have been unfair, and Cole took care of business. So, again, he's a smart young man. He's a guy that can get the job done. I think they have a lot of faith in him.
No shortage of storylines today. Before we turn it over to basketball here to finish up on the football side of things with you, Dave, the angle of course, the old school for Curt Cignetti, where he once coached at Elon. They're now number one in the nation after North Dakota's loss to Southern Illinois, ending that 39-game win streak they had. I mean, certainly there's probably some pressure, but also some anxiousness to get out there and kind of prove they're the number one team in the land, right?
Well, we played here in 19, and so that was the immediate year right after Cignetti had left. So the fact that there's going to be limited fans and they played here before, I think a lot of that tarnish the shine has been tarnished off. He told me, he said, listen, because he told us last week, we're not the number 2 team in the country. He didn't know that North Dakota State was losing. He said, we're not the number 2 team in the country right now. Well, no, you're not. You're the number 1 team. And he said, how I've approached that is I want to embrace it. Let's have fun with it. He said, but we don't talk about it. We're not focused on staying number 1. We're focused on being 1-0 at the end of this week.
We mentioned local flavor from the Hampton Roads area on that JMU roster for football with the likes of Diamonte Tucker-Dorsey, Wayne Davis from Lake Taylor. You know about Cole Johnson, quarterback from Cox High School in Virginia Beach. And they have some local flavor on the basketball side with Michael Christmas, who started at Landstown High School, won a state championship, state player of the year now with the Dukes. And they got the coach of the year and Mark Byington. And they're not going to be at full strength, though. Give me sort of a thumbnail on Christmas's play A and B going into this tournament off the regular season title, but they're not going to be 100% there.
Well, Mike got a late start because everybody got a late start, and then the Dukes had to hit pause early, and then Mike was out due to contact tracing, so he missed a significant number of practices. So it took him a bit of time to get back into a rhythm, getting in the flow. As he got back in, and the Dukes really began to put win streaks together, he was playing really, really well, rebounding the ball well, shooting the ball from three, was, again, not thinking, just playing freely. So he's been a big part of what they're doing, but they're missing Matt Lewis, who's a senior. He's the player of the year, led the conference in scoring beginning to end. Probably, Matt, one of the most unfair things I've ever seen in the world of sports, where a kid who's been this good, Matt Lewis is the kind of kid you want on your team. You want him representing your university. You want him representing your company because he does everything the right way. He's a great teammate. Matt not only led in scoring, but he's in the top 15 and rebounding, assists, and steals. He plays great defense, draws one of the top two assignments from the other team. And to see a kid who's played that hard since his freshman year to go down with an injury that in 6 weeks from now, he'll be back playing again. He'll be back getting on his feet again. It's probably one of the most unfair things I've seen. But this is a pretty good team that Coach Byington's put together. He's got a great staff built here. He recruited some guys who want to play. His freshman class, we've got 3 guys on this freshman class that are going to, if they're here 4 years or 5 years, they're going to make a big dent in the CAA. And it's been fun so far to watch, and I look forward to seeing things get going here, hopefully tomorrow afternoon against whoever we play, and maybe they'll play a few more games and knock on the door of the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, CAA Coach of the Year in Byington, CAA Player of the Year in Lewis, and it's a shame. You hate to see injuries anytime, but if that had happened in January, he'd probably be ready to go for this tournament, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, they said in 6 to 8 weeks he'll be back on his feet.
Man.
And they wanted to make sure they conveyed that because Matt tested the NBA waters after last season and decided to come back. And they want to make sure that teams know that Matt Lewis is going to be full strength and ready to go.
Last one for you. You've watched the CAA hoops real closely. You know it as well as anybody. You got a sleeper that can win this thing? I mean, you know, JMU's the 1 seed, but I'm not sure people have them as the favorite. I'm kind of liking Hofstra, the 4 seed, which has a guy from our state, and Jalen Ray, who can fill it up out of Hampton High. What's your take on the tournament in general?
Hofstra is a team that can very much win the tournament. It's going to be Hofstra. It's going to be Northeastern. I still leave JMU in there, and don't rule out Charleston. Earl Grant is a terrific coach. He doesn't have the studs he's had the last couple of years where he's had a key go-to star like in Grant Riller, but he's got some pieces. But again, when you're trying to win, 3 games in a row, 4 games in a row, it can be challenging, and all it takes is 1 or 2 bad calls to go your way or 1 or 2 bad bounces. And listen, the Dukes have had that happen this year. They played through that 7-game win streak with shots that should have fallen and didn't. Somehow finding a way to win. So I think that those, in my opinion, those teams, those top 4 teams are going to be the ones that are the favorite. But don't rule out a Delaware. They've got pieces. Don't rule out. Strange things have happened to see Towson get hot. They've struggled this year mightily, and they seem to have some chemistry issues. But Towson could still put it together. But Jalen Ray's a kid who he can take over a game by himself, and he's got that ability. That Hofstra roster is built for championships.
Yeah, it doesn't hurt when you're going up a couple years ago against a guy in the NBA, Justin Wright Foreman, in practice, and that guy could fill it up, as you saw, for years there in the CAA. And it wouldn't shock me at all if we see a buzzer beater at some point in the tournament, whether it's in the quarters, the semis, the championship. You never know, as the Dukes are the number 1 seed in the CAA tourney for the first time since 1993. They await the winner of today's Elon Towson matchup tomorrow. Make sure you follow him on Twitter, DT Radio Guy. He gives you all the JMU coverage when it comes to football and basketball. Enjoy the games, football and basketball. Dave, you stay safe, and we'll keep in touch, all right?
Thanks, Matt. I appreciate the time. Go Dukes.